I won gold in Paris.
Toby Roberts.
Toby Roberts.
Toby Roberts.
Toby Roberts secured Team GB's 14th gold medal with a dramatic win.
In the Boulder and lead.
First ever gold in climbing.
Lots of people watching this will have been kind of watching you doing your thing. Tell us a little bit about your win.
But this video isn't about shiny podium photos or what you may have seen on TV. This is how I did it.
Here goes the swing, up to the top. Beautiful for Toby. Toby Roberts, the only athlete to top out. He didn't need to, but what a way to finish.
The crowd are on their feet. Everybody is screaming.
Shortly after qualifying for Paris and Laval in October 2023, we headed for a short end-of-season holiday and a few days by the pool to prepare for the absolute training onslaught that was about to happen. During 5 days of brainstorming, we dissected the sport climbing combined format and the demands of the competition using my experiences from the World Championships in Bern and Laval. We concluded that the winner in Paris would most likely be the most successful combined athlete. In Tokyo, if you won a discipline, either speed, lead or boulder, you would almost be guaranteed a medal. And the podium in Tokyo was the winner of lead, the winner of boulder, and the winner of speed. In Paris, we knew this was unlikely to be the case due to the new point scoring system. It wasn't a case of choosing between lead and boulder or doubling down on one of the disciplines, or even choosing between physical shape or technical ability. It was everything. The aim was to try and be in the best physical shape of my life, as well as level up my technique. It was essentially to become the best climber I could possibly be. It was fully committing to doing everything possible with the available time and resources. My dad is incredibly supportive as a father, and as a coach, he always has a strategy. Paris was no different. He is very observant, including taking many of the videos you're about to see. Climbing moves are so varied that one move never means too much. It might have just been a weird move. However, if you are consistently struggling with very similar moves, then there's definitely something you can do about it. He had identified significant areas to work on before Paris, including slabs, dynos, and laches. It can be hard to truly acknowledge problems, to be brutally honest with yourself and your team when assessing things in black and white. To take ownership of these things and to do something about them is empowering. Climbing is about problem solving, and weaknesses are just another problem to solve, whatever they are. If you understand what's needed, then you can create an environment to progressively try and turn those weaknesses into strengths. Paris was always going to be the ultimate test, to see if everything could come together, to see if we could implement the ultimate plan. A few weeks after Laval, and I was ready to get going. We headed to the airport for the flight home with a sense of urgency. Time was being lost. On the plane, my dad sociably put headphones on and disappeared into a little bubble. As we landed at Heathrow, he shut his iPad and announced, "It's done." What an idiot. Joking aside, we agreed on a strategy, training plan and schedule that was going to see me through to Paris. Every session for 10 months would be targeted and completely focused around the plan. A few days later, we relocated to Sheffield and met back up with my other coach, Liam. The first 8 weeks of my program, from late November 2023 to late January 2024, were the most physically demanding period of my life. I wasn't in bad shape when I started training, having recently won in Laval, but the aim was to build a strength base that would underpin later gains when moving to a power phase. Basically, the aim was to level up. This was a progressive S&C program that initially focused around static strength and would progress into dynamic power during the season. Climbing volume had also increased with the split between power endurance, and working on some fundamental bouldering skills through a range of sessions. I was spending half my life on a Bosa ball, with tennis balls and cards being thrown at me and things swinging about. I was essentially back in kids club. These were working fundamental skills of balance, movement, coordination, reflexes, laches, as well as a lot of execution in varying forms. Every day started with stretching and yoga, mainly because without doing them, I could barely move. I don't exactly enjoy stretching and yoga, but it just became something that I had to do. Every evening became about fueling and recovery, too exhausted to think about anything else. Late December 2023, I was hoping to feel good for a kilterboard session that appeared on my YouTube channel. I didn't feel good, but the video hints at what a daily training session looked like during this period. In early January, I returned to Sheffield, and it's safe to say that January was a lot harder than December. Tiredness was slowly and dangerously being replaced with fatigue, both mental and physical. Laval seemed a long time ago, and Paris seemed a long way away. Days were short and the weather was cold, which invariably meant my skin was dry, cracked, and painful. Filing, taping, moisturizing, and generally just obsessing about my skin were a part of every day. When the skin is bad, there is less friction, and you end up constantly over-pulling, sapping energy, and getting less return for the energy you're investing. Everything started to blur and became more of a fight. I would tell myself these are the times when gains are made. Something which I've really learned is that when you think you've hit your limit and you can't possibly go further, there's always a bit left. You can always push that one bit further and give that one bit extra. So many times I've started a session and it's not gone well. I've pushed that one little bit harder and it's ended up being a really good session. Sometimes it's just about mindset and really digging deep to give it your everything. Not only does that become a new benchmark for how hard you can push yourself, but it also makes you question whether you've ever really pushed yourself in your previous sessions. What have you had? Where would you be now? Even if you just get marginal gains, over a long time they are compounded. 1% on 1% on 1% eventually adds up to a massive number. There are very few times when you actually know you didn't have anything left to give, when you know you absolutely extracted the maximum out of yourself. It's not always an easy balance, as I would later discover in the Chamonix World Cup in 2024, of knowing when to push and when to back off. Paris was 7 months away. January was about building capacity. Now wasn't the time to worry about Paris. Now was the time to fight. My last climb on the last day was the hardest problem in Sheffield at the time. I was so psyched to send, but also too tired to raise a smile. A few days later, I had a flying visit to Yonder in London to check in on a side quest, 159. Look out for that video on my channel, coming soon. 16 days on, 2 days off, and now we're on today. So, yeah, I think that's a good training. That's a good training schedule. 16 days on, 2 days off, 16 days on. This is my training plans. 16 days on, 2 days off, 16 days on. You get 3 days over Christmas, and that's your only rest of the year. That would be £100 a month. Send me a message on Instagram, just Cash App. Cash App. Or if you see me in person, just come up to me with a lot of cash, and I'll give you some training advice. Oh man! Oh, we're so close. It also brought a much needed change of pace, doing a media day with some light-hearted filming. A few days later, we arrived in Innsbruck. Whilst I'm always so psyched to get to Innsbruck, it was more of a maintenance stop, to have a few days back on a rope to keep things ticking over. Top end stamina doesn't just arrive after some training, it's built in stages. I knew I wasn't going to be hitting anything like my top end lead form, but it was good to be back on a rope. There was nothing exciting about this trip from a climbing perspective, other than it's always nice to be in Innsbruck amongst psyched people. After so much S&C work, it was time to practice standing on my feet again in more of a climbing context. There is no better place for that than Paris, and the first of several trips to the French capital this year. It was a trip of two halves, with a good comp sim at the climbing district where I felt quite good on some comp blocks that in reality played to my strengths. This was followed by an invite by the French team to a comp simulation in Karma in Fontainebleau, where I was thoroughly exposed. This session felt like a disaster. I was struggling to put together a round and was feeling progressively frustrated. I don't like to leave boulders untopped, and the red mist had definitely come down. The French athletes had left by now, with most prepping for the upcoming French Championships, and I was on my own, throwing myself at the boulders with diminishing returns and diminishing skin. The harder I tried, the worse things were getting. My skin was bad by this point, with bleeding tips and splits everywhere. I was frustrated and started to question why I wasn't seeing any of the gains of the training. My dad and Liam were looking on, knowing there wasn't going to be progress, but also knowing I wasn't going to stop. The end of the session was me having a terrible time against a few boulder problems. I didn't feel like Innsbruck had been a great trip, and now I was leaving Paris feeling the same. You work hard and you want results. Things weren't feeling good. I put that to the back of my mind, knowing in a few days there was a trip planned that I was so psyched for. Nothing was going to compare to this. Tokyo, let's go. Me and my dad arrived in Tokyo a few days before Liam joined us and quickly headed to B-Pump Ogikubo. I couldn't wait to climb, whilst also knowing I was more and more worried that I hadn't been seeing any progress so far. There is no doubt that the grades in B-Pump are some of the hardest in the world, and I'd remember climbing the second hardest grade, light green, on my previous trip almost a year ago. Within the first 4 days, I couldn't climb anything close to what I could previously. I was struggling for technique, execution, power, and friction. Nothing was working. The harder I tried and the more I pulled, the worse things were. I trained harder and had regressed. Inwardly, I was in freefall, constantly questioning where I was at and what was happening, whilst obsessing over the state of my skin. It's easy when things are going well, but what about when they're not? What happens when you're deep in the hole, narrow-minded, and feeling physically worn out, and every action being governed by how bad you feel, mentally and physically? You saw the big picture when you're committing to the plan, but when you're the one living it, the day-to-day fight is a brutal one. Everything was focused towards Paris in 6 months, and with less than 2 months to go until the World Cup season commenced, I wasn't feeling happy. It felt like a crisis. On a rest day, we headed to Shinjuku and ended up in an okonomiyaki restaurant and conversations about training. I sat down with my dad and questioned where I was at and the decisions we'd made. I couldn't understand why I was 3 months into my training and climbing so badly over 3 different trips. I was now also in Tokyo, somewhere I couldn't wait to get to, but felt so isolated and remote, and it just magnified how bad I was feeling.
Toby explained how bad he felt. However, it wasn't really a surprise that he felt that way. It was expected at some point as part of his plan. The load was basically too high not to. Ever since Toby said he wanted to compete at the Olympics, I never underestimated what a massive undertaking that would be. Basically, how much resilience was going to be required. I've observed climbers and climbing at every stage of their career over 12 years, and the mental and physical skill set that are on show are just at a different level to anything else. The best way to know what you're capable of is to push yourself to a really uncomfortable place. And that's exactly where Toby was living, building the resilience that's required to operate at the highest level. It doesn't come easily, and you have to understand what it takes to get there. Backing yourself when it matters is a skill you learn by repeatedly being exposed to challenging circumstances and learning from them. As both a coach and a parent, the outcome has always been solely down to Toby. I often didn't know where one role started and another stopped, but what I did know is, as a father, some of it was hard to witness. There are lines between tiredness, fatigue, and burnout. There's no doubt that we'd put Toby in a hole and he was struggling to rebound or even start to see the gains. He was being challenged, but at the same time, he wasn't worried to challenge and question things, and was ready to make changes if needed. Plan around Paris was never going to be easy. Toby wasn't always supposed to feel comfortable. I didn't tell him it was going to be okay. That was for him to figure out.
When clarity returns, you know you are better for those experiences. You are stronger because of them, but you also have to be able to get there without breaking. Liam arrived in Tokyo the next day, and the remainder of the trip became the perfect balance of intense execution sessions with significant amounts of banter. Wow, I'm so good. Forfeit. Barbecues. Dinner is served. And Red Bull.
Energy.
By the end of the 3-week Tokyo trip, things felt like they were slowly coming together, like a corner had been turned. I climbed my first B-Pump black tape, albeit a bit softer than other black tapes, and I was starting to feel slightly more powerful, but also moving well and becoming more rounded as a climber. Another Innsbruck trip came and went in mid-March, now in full preparation for the first 2 World Cups of the season that were fast approaching. I still wasn't feeling amazing on a rope, but was certainly feeling better than I was at the end of January. Innsbruck was shortly followed by an amazing event at Rockcity in Hull with no less than 6 World Cup winners in attendance. It could have been a World Cup. It was a huge amount of fun to try out the 1-minute comp with some incredible setters and climbers. This was a brilliant exercise for execution, which is now hugely relevant for where I was at in my training and building into the World Cup season. It was 6 months since I qualified in Laval and now 4 months until Paris, and it was time to see where I was at the start of the World Cup season. There was an excitement before the first Boulder World Cup of the season in China. All the athletes were staying in the same official hotel and everyone was incredibly psyched for a huge season to begin. I made it through to the semi-final, which would now double as the final after losing a round of climbing due to weather issues. I topped 2 boulders and 3 zones to finish in 4th place, which in theory should have been a little frustrating as no one likes 4th place, but in reality I was happy. The boulders I topped were a paddle and a slab. Previously these would have been boulders I struggled with. The 2 boulders I failed to top were the most powerful boulders, which previously would have been my preferred style. I left the competition feeling there had been some underlying gains, maybe not physically yet, but certainly in style and execution. We headed for Wujiang for a similar test on lead. April is very early for a lead comp, so I was never going to look into the results too deeply, but more to try and find some good flow on a rope. I was one of 4 climbers to top both qualification routes. And I reached the high points at 45 plus on a fun semi-final route. This was my 2nd full season as a senior, but something that was now feeling different was my ability to compose myself on a lead route, to maintain some composure where required and to find some flow. The final route had a middle crux with black volumes that I was happy to navigate my way through to a series of powerful moves to reach the head wall, which was requiring more and more fight. I reached a joint high point with a bit of a stopper move and one on count back to the semi-finals. It was really nice to take my 3rd World Cup win and my handprint joined those of previous climbers who had won over the years, a nice touch from the organisers. To finish 4th in Boulder and 1st in lead was useful feedback from a combined perspective, even though it was early in the season. The main thing was I felt I'd turned a corner in my climbing and I was slowly starting to feel more confident, but there was work to do. It was back to the UK and back to training. Training started to become a lot more specific to the task at hand, and I was taking every opportunity to get exposure to comp style bouldering. Media interest around the Olympics was also starting to increase and added a new dynamic to things. The Salt Lake City World Cup was next on the calendar, and it was a trip I was so psyched for. A great place to compete and train. It was another Boulder comp where the bare result should have left me a lot more disappointed than it actually was. I missed finals by one attempt, which is always frustrating, but the two boulders that topped were the lache and the slab, and I did these in very few attempts. The boulders I struggled with were the no-tex holds and a powerful move to a crimp. This was very similar to the first World Cup of the season in Keqiao, where the boulders I topped were previously my anti-style. Belief in my plan and where I was at was quietly growing. After the World Cup, the US team ran a combined comp simulation. I hadn't necessarily prepared for this too much, but was psyched to practice this format. 2-zone boulders and cumulative points between lead and boulder make a big difference. As soon as you don't top a boulder, the implications feel far greater for your round and score. Whilst it should make no difference, the reality is it does for some reason. I topped the first slab boulder, then my round seemed to fall apart a little. I didn't top boulder 2, 3 or 4 despite scoring points on all of them. This performance then carried over into my lead, which only magnified things. I basically learned that the combined format can massively stress you out, and unless you can control that, your comp is over. It's not the points you failed to score in the previous climbs that are the problem. Those are history. It's the points you'll fail to score in the next climbs. Those should still be in your control. I returned to the UK with mixed feelings. I was positive about a World Cup where I missed the final, but upset about a combined competition where I actually did okay. With Paris being so accessible and also scoping out training venues for Paris in the summer, we returned for a short 5-day training camp at the end of May. Day 1 was a routinely day at Arcos Panton. This session felt like the new ground for me, not for the grades, but route reading, commitment to moves, execution, and limited rest between successful back-to-back on-sites up to 8C+. On day 2, we headed to Climb Up, meeting up with some strong climbers on the French team for a spray wall session. The Climb Up spray wall was an amazing hold selection, expertly set by World Cup setter Pierre Brit, who had clearly put so much thought into everything. In addition, Liam was making up boulders, which meant things were about to get both weird and conceptual, and on demand, he readily put together a set of world-class problems. In my opinion, he's one of the best in the world at this. For the first time, I felt I was both powerful and moving well, almost like my underlying gains I worked so hard for were starting to expose themselves. However, given this was May and not August, the feeling was short-lived and the session progressed into some brutal circuits on the spray wall before a rest day. I was quickly back to feeling tired, but not without what felt like a much needed glimpse into what the future might hold. With just over 2 months ago, everything started to focus around Paris and things started to feel very real. Just having a look at the climbing venue. It's just behind me here, so it's all still being built and everything. But from what it looks like, it looks really, really cool. I like the design, and yeah, I'm so excited to compete here. The trip drew to a close with 2 more hard training days where I was definitely tired, but this time it didn't matter. Confidence was building. Early June saw an international comp sim run by GB Climbing at Parthian in London on the Titan wall. The same wall, holds, setters and climbers would all feature in Paris. Over 2 days there was a semi-final and final format comp simulation. It was an open invitation in line with IFSC rules, and it was an excellent event thanks to the setters and the coaches involved. From now on, my plan into Paris would only include top-end power and lead work over much shorter and intense sessions. The Innsbruck World Cup late in June featured back-to-back lead and Boulder World Cups, 2 World Cups within 5 days. A year ago at the 2023 Innsbruck World Cups, I finished 9th in Boulder, and in the lead semi-final I completely powered out, coming 16th, unable to handle the demands of the schedule. The schedule also means that any man making finals in both disciplines would climb Boulder semi-finals, Boulder finals, lead qualifications, lead semi-finals and lead finals within 3 days. An absolute brutal schedule. It's hard just to say it, let alone do it. As always with Innsbruck, it was also certain to be an incredibly competitive field. We've had a lot of trips to Innsbruck over the years and definitely have preferred accommodation where possible. Sometimes though, the unexpected happens. The noise was absolutely relentless from 7 AM, but sometimes things aren't in your control and you just have to deal with what you're given and go and give it everything. I made it through Boulder qualies before the only rest day. Boulder 1 in the semis felt steady. Before I misread the first move on Boulder 2 and denied myself an attempt on the powerful top section, which I was absolutely gutted about. I managed to secure a zone in the dying seconds which would prove crucial, but another power boulder got away. Boulder 3 was a lache into a paddle top. I was close to the top, which was definite progress. Boulder 4 was a slab which I managed to top, which I'm very psyched with. This slab was very sketchy and just managed to get it in the dying seconds. As usual with Innsbruck, there was an incredible crowd and electric atmosphere. Boulder 1 was a movement-based boulder that I was happy to top and did relatively quickly. Boulder 2 was a fierce power boulder. Despite feeling very powerful, I couldn't unlock the zone, and it was another power boulder which got the better of me. This one was absolutely gutting as well because I did just feel so close to doing this and was one of my favourite types of boulders. Boulder 3 was a slab that felt relatively comfortable, which was satisfying. Before Boulder 4, where I couldn't figure out a tricky first move, leaving me just off the podium in 4th for the second time this season. However, similar to Keqiao and Salt Lake City, this felt like a positive result, and having made it to the final, I had a chance of climbing in all 6 rounds if I could do the same in lead. The main problem now was that it was 11 PM and due to the amazing DJ, I was buzzing and felt like I'd been in a club. I was also now being accompanied by an anti-doping officer for the obligatory post-comp tests. I just discovered that I was second up in lead qualies the following morning at 8 AM, which was now under 9 hours and counting. Anti-doping is never a quick affair, and now me and some of the Japanese athletes were now in the anti-doping station, sat there very late at night, almost like a party atmosphere. It was like we were out on Sunday night, knowing we had work tomorrow morning. It was always going to be a hard task, but we just had to go and get it done. So when I arrived back in the apartment, I sat there with my mind still wired, the DJ's song still going around in my head, unable to sleep, knowing tomorrow was going to be a bit rough, but it was a good experience. Gonna get the best 5 hours sleep that anyone's ever got in the history of sleep. This was not a problem. I felt amazing after such a fun boulder finals the night before. I managed to secure a joint high point on my first lead route, which pretty much put me into the semi-finals. This was a result, because a few hours later, the delicate balance of no sleep and caffeine went very wrong. Route 2 was a battle where I went for a questionable dynamic move, but went okay under the circumstances, and I was through to the semi-final in 4th place. We returned to the apartment where I still struggled to sleep, right up until a few hours before the semi-final route where I crashed. And a short while later, I was heading back to the wall for finals. The semi-final route was tough, with an insecure section low down followed by green simple volumes that required some good execution and power to get through. The moves on the head wall were a case of fighting the pump, with each move feeling necessary to edge nearer to finals. 43 points was the cut-off for finals, and with 46 plus, I was in second place behind Jakob and had achieved my main objective for the Innsbruck World Cups, to make both finals. This came with the added advantage that the final was the next day and I could get some much needed rest. The finals route was available to observe during the following day. It's not something I'm a massive fan of, where personally I'd prefer strict isolation conditions, but I headed to read the route with Liam during the afternoon. One thing was for sure, this route didn't climb anything like I read it. The beta was mostly the same, but the route climbed like stacked boulder problems with very physical sections followed by poor rests, and felt like one of the sketchiest, insecure routes I'd ever been on. The first section was through Rockcity pinches that were worse than I was expecting. Which was followed by Paddle Dyno, which was more committing than I hoped. Pretty unsure of how hard it was going to be, but when you got there the holds were pretty slippy actually, and it was a lot more committing than a lot of us actually thought, so that's not the nicest thing to have a third clip. Then the black pinches were both technical whilst feeling insecure. Wujiang got you to a 360 campus section that required power that the rest of the route had already stolen. The crimson pockets which followed were not what was required at the time, and I fought my way up to second place behind Alex Megos, before Jakob impressively took the home win and I finished with a bronze medal. I left Innsbruck very content with 6 rounds of climbing, 5 of them within 3 days, and finished 4th in bouldering and 3rd in lead. I left the Innsbruck World Cups in 2023 feeling like I didn't have the physical shape required for back-to-back boulder and lead World Cups. I left in 2024 feeling like I had made progress with that. All the time Paris was edging closer, with just the Chamonix World Cup to go. We returned to the UK, where I was incredibly psyched to officially join the Red Bull team at the Silverstone Grand Prix. I've drunk Red Bull during comps for years and I'm a massive F1 fan, so combining the two of them, that was a dream come true. Logistics around Chamonix were complicated, trying to minimise travel and tiredness. My dad went out to Innsbruck first to drive a hire car to Chamonix for the post-Chamonix training in Innsbruck. This meant I was at home on the Wednesday having a solo light activation session before heading out to Chamonix on the Thursday, where I'd meet up with my coaches. The whole idea around Chamonix was to enjoy it and feel good on a rope. This was my last chance before Paris to climb in front of a massive and psyched crowd. Everything about my plan said I should now be peaking and ready to feel good. So despite topping both qualifying routes, I felt like I was fighting for my life whilst climbing. Neither route was comfortable and there were quite a few tops across the field, and I didn't think either route was particularly hard. Something wasn't right. What came to light in the post-qualifications inquest is not something I'm amazingly proud of, given I was supposed to be vaguely professional and heading to Paris in 2 weeks. My solo light activation session on the Wednesday ended up being a 5-hour max board session, which for good measure I finished with 8 35 move 80 circuits with 1 minute breaks. What was even more impressive, and I'm particularly proud of this, is that I completely erased this from my brain before heading to Chamonix. This was not an effective tapering strategy, but sometimes for the love of climbing you just get sucked into a session. Thankfully, I felt fresher after the warm-up and managed to put together a solid performance to top the semi-final route and go through to finals. Finals in Chamonix are incredible, with the whole town coming out to watch and cheer everyone up the wall. The final route climbed well with some showy moves to the head wall, where things suddenly ramped up into a difficult boulder problem. I missed a clip and whilst fighting the pump made a few bad beta decisions before falling. These weren't mistakes, these are the things you have to execute well to win World Cups, making good decisions when fighting pump. Colin Duffy did that better than anyone to take the win, followed by Sam Mavazou in second place. Whilst the aim was to feel good across all 4 routes in Chamonix, it only took the semi-final route for me to know my lead shape was good. After trying to sabotage my own preparation, I felt like physically I was now ready for Paris. Physical shape is not everything though, and we always knew Paris was going to be an incredible mental test. All things considered, I was happy with the result, got another bronze medal, and left Chamonix ready for the final stages of my prep. From Chamonix, I went straight to Innsbruck, as we planned, where I didn't train too hard. I just stuck to 3 or 4 routes a day, focusing mainly on recovery. This was followed by a combined comp sim run by the Austrian Federation at the end of the week. It was a great event and hugely appreciated. Whilst the comp and climbers were amazing, and my climbing was okay, but mentally, I let things get to me, again. Despite topping the first boulder, I struggled on boulder 2, and my round deteriorated. Mistakes were made that couldn't happen in Paris. Resilience was still required. There is no doubt that the combined format with cumulative points has deep implications when you're the one trying to manage a round. Everything becomes magnified. From then onwards, the next few weeks would all be about preparing for the mental side of the competition. That meant feeling good and enjoying things. Back in the UK, one of my last sessions before Paris was 4 boulders on the Titan wall, expertly set at short notice by Alexander Lamel and Matt Cousins. and without the luxury of the Innsbruck lead wall, I used a circuit on the 50-degree board. As I knew from February, when I was stuck in the day-to-day reality of my training plan, I couldn't necessarily see the bigger picture at the time. In Paris, years of hard work was going to come down to 8 boulders and 2 routes within 2 rounds. I couldn't imagine a more intense climbing environment. Paris was going to be big, bigger than anything I'd experienced before. There was going to be only 2 outcomes. I was happy with my climbing or I wasn't. For me to be happy at a competition, it has to be about the climbing. You have to be present for every minute, immediately putting anything behind you that's negative and only focusing on what you can do. You have to attack the climbs, be positive and enjoy it, even the bad bits. Mindset is everything. My dad has always been my coach, especially from a strategy and sports psych perspective. He writes my plan, will drive sessions when needed, identifies areas for improvement, and will make wholesale changes when needed. Equally, when everything is ticking along, he lets things happen. My first isolation with Liam was in the Arco Youth World Championships in 2019. Since then, things have steadily evolved. First and foremost, he is now a good friend, who happens to be a massive climbing enthusiast, an amazing coach, and one of the most skilled yet understated people I've ever known. From the outside, we may sometimes look like the least professional setup going. For me, I've always chosen to climb because I just absolutely love it. My best sessions are very hard and very challenging, but also some of the most enjoyable and rewarding sessions possible. My coaching setup has obscene levels of banter and enjoyment, and that was something which wasn't going to change for Paris. We were going to take nothing too seriously, increase the banter, enjoy the experience, and climb. It was time to go onto the first boulder. It took me a couple goes to get established, maybe due to a bit of nerves combined with quite a hard first move, but I slowly made my way up through the boulder until I found myself into the top position. I managed to find a really nice position with a high heel, which allowed me to get quite tucked into the top, and I went to bring my hand through to get the match. And very stupidly, instead of seeing the tape was on the volume, I thought it was on the hold, so I tried to reach all the way through to get the match. And that in turn like spits me off the boulder. So that is just a completely wasted attempt. And on the first boulder of my round, I'd already thrown away 15 points, which is not an ideal start, but it was also going to be a massive mental test, so I had to try and keep it together. I didn't have the time or energy to have another go, so I was sat there on the mats going, oh my god, Toby, what have you just done? You've just thrown away 15 points, you trained all this time, you put all this work in, and you've just thrown away all those points. What have you done? I'd remembered the previous comp sims, and I knew that this competition was going to be all about mindset and all about keeping it together. So now I'd just thrown away 15 points, and it was about going back into the cool zone, remembering those past experiences, and trying my hardest to keep my mental game strong, because I knew that this was going to be a tough comp. And if I throw away on the first boulder and lose my shit essentially, then it's not gonna go well. I found that playing a song through my headphones in the cool zone and just completely detaching from the competition scene really helped me. So I had my headphones in, I was trying to remember that the next boulder, it starts from scratch, just remove that from my past and just go out and climb again. And that's what I did. The next 2 boulders was the electric boulder and the coordination boulder. The main thing about these boulders is that they were incredibly hard and had very, very few tops in the whole competition. So the most important thing was just going out there, climbing it, not losing my head, and getting as far up them as I possibly could. And one of the proudest things of the whole experience for me was I was able to go out and just give everything, and I probably got the maximum out of myself on those 2 boulders. Across those 2 boulders I got 20 points, so securing the second zone on both of them. After 3 minutes and 15 minutes in the cool zone, now was the time for the slab boulder. Slabs have been a definite weakness in my past and something I put so much work into. So this was going to be a big test. It was going to be the biggest stage it's gonna be a slab boulder. I'm gonna have to go out there and try and keep my head. I don't know what the points which anyone else is on. All I know is that I've got a boulder in front of me and I've got to try and top it. And that's what I did. It took me a few goes. It was quite a tricky slab with a hard step through, but I managed to keep my head and just topped it within the dying seconds of the clock. So that was another really proud moment for me. And when I topped that boulder, I was like, yes, you've put a really good round in there. Those were hard boulders, and you've got out with probably the maximum. You've probably got the maximum out of yourself, so I was happy with that. I've spoken about resilience a lot in my plan, whether it's in my previous trainings, in competitions. Climbing is as much a mental game as it is a physical one. And after not having the best boulder 1, after not getting tops on boulder 2 or 3, coming out to the slab, it was about having mental resilience, putting those boulders behind me and going out and doing what I know I can do. And that's what I did. I slowly worked out the boulder and then finished with a top, a solid end to my round. That was it. I finished boulder semi-finals in 3rd place. Lead was in 2 days and I could not be more psyched. Okay, and that was it. It's on to lead semis. Lead semis was quite standard. There was nothing different. It sort of ran like a normal World Cup. Normally it's quite busy. There's around 20 people in the isolation area, and then slowly climber after climber leaves to go and climb their route and learn their fate. And it's quite a nice environment. It's almost like the Hunger Games type thing. But we ran through a normal warm-up with my coach, Liam, and my dad, and then it was my turn to climb. After previously going through the route, we'd identified some areas to look at and some tricky areas, and there were quite a few of them on this route. So coming out, I can't lie, I was definitely a bit nervous. The nerves were building up more than usual, no surprise there. But as I pulled onto the route, all of those nerves pretty much left me, as they usually do, and I just tried to climb my best. This route, it didn't climb the most smooth. It had some very weird moves with a very tricky low section. There was a move around 12 points where I think we lost around 8 climbers, which was quite a lot for a move that low, and I needed to get to 16 points to qualify for the finals. And when I got there, I took a pretty scary cut loose, and I'm not gonna lie, when I was there and I cut loose, I was like, oh my god, have you just messed up? And then just activated every single muscle in my fingers and forearms and managed to stay on. And then when I got a couple moves higher, I heard a big cheer from the crowd, and I was like, okay, I think you made the finals there. But obviously I wasn't gonna just drop off there, and then I tried to get as high as I could and ended with a pretty solid result. I think I had 68 points, just behind Alberto, who got the high point. I came down and I realized pretty quickly that I'd qualified for finals in 2nd place, which I was just so psyched with. The first aim is always just to make the final. The semi-final is by far the most nerve-wracking round, and I think all 8 climbers who made the final were almost relieved more than happy, which is quite a typical thing with semi-finals. And it was finals time. I couldn't be more psyched to get going. The biggest thing with finals is that there's nothing to lose anymore. You're in the finals and you just want to go out and give everything, enjoy yourself, relax on the wall, trust your abilities, trust all your training, and then just fully go for it. And that was my plan. I'm really happy I was able just to completely relax and then give it everything. But just a quick rundown on the whole competition. Let's go. So boulder 1 was the electric boulder. This boulder was very strange. It had a very hard first move, and it climbed differently to a lot of 2-zone boulders. It was pretty much just a 3-move boulder. A very weird and tricky first move into a very big second move, and then just another very big last move. So this boulder was definitely just about getting it done, and 7 attempts later, I finally managed to grab that top hold. And I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely relieved when I hit that top hold, because it's just one of those boulders which you can so easily just not get and just leave you on the back foot straight away. So I was very happy to get that one done. Boulder 2 was the slab, and this was the first slab of the whole season which I didn't top. Probably not ideal timing, but yeah, quite funny. It was quite a strange slab. It was had a dynamic top, mainly standing on sort of slopey big feet and just about trusting yourself, basically. It was a hard slab, and I think only had 1 top from Serrato, so just getting the 10 at the end was so important for my score, but it would have been nice to have some goes at the last move. But overall, yeah, psyched to get 10 on it. Mentally, now I was in a really good space. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing or how the round was affecting me. I just wanted to go and climb. So even though I knew I probably could have had the slab or got the slab on another day, I was just happy to go and climb and psyched for the next boulder already. Boulder 3 was the elusive power boulder. This boulder featured a very, very shouldery first move, which I think can be directly linked to my winter training. And it took me a few attempts to get there, but after establishing some very weird beta to get up to the second zone, almost like a finger wrap pressy type thing, I found myself on the last move. This last move featured a weird cross into an undercut with a very poor foot, and with a lot of tension, I pulled in and then got myself around to the finish hold and then matched to top the boulder. This was probably one of the happiest moments. I think all of that training that I did led up to topping this boulder. This was the first proper power boulder that I actually topped this whole season. So where I failed on the slab, I got back on the power. So I'd say I peaked perfectly for that exact moment. Every point in a combined competition is so important, and that's why the top on this power boulder was pretty much single-handedly, not single-handedly, but it got me the gold medal. Those 15 points which I gained, which no one else was able to get, was such a big factor in my score, and just shows how important it is just to be such a rounded climber. If you want to go and check out the power boulder, it's up on my Instagram. Go check it out, Toby_climbing. Boulder 4 was the coordination boulder, and this was more complex. It had quite an easy first move, but into a really tricky paddle. I thought that I could stop in the middle and spent quite a lot of time trying that, which was quite frustrating, but also by that point my skin had got quite bad and I wasn't finding friction on the holds, and just a bit of a combination of everything. I did manage to make the 10 points, the second zone, which was quite gutting, but I knew that I was still in contention and finished the round in third place, just 6 points behind first. So whilst I didn't lose anything there, I was quite gutted not to have a go at the top move. But I think Colin was the only top on that boulder, which was pretty cool. It was yeah, it was really cool to watch that afterwards. Boulders 2, 3 and 4 each had one top by Serato, me and Colin, which is, like, for the setters, that is just such an incredible split, and yeah, huge job to them. I was about 6 points back in third place and so psyched for lead. And now it was lead time. I can't lie, I was incredibly nervous for lead. This is the most nervous I've ever been for a single competition, and it's not exactly hard to see why. The lead route, we all went back off the boulder, back to isolation. We all got on with our individual lead warm-ups. I was there with Liam doing my usual circuit, which I do after coming back off the boulder. And now it was about just looking at the topo in isolation, going through the route, preparing yourself as much as you possibly could, completely forgetting about the boulder round, and just going out and climbing. As the climbers slowly went out for their rounds, it became more and more clear that the people were getting quite high up the route. People were spending more time on the rope and the atmosphere was getting more tense. And by the time it was my time to climb, I just wanted to go out there and give it everything. Before I went out, I went through the route, went up to the wall, and before I pulled on, I just said to myself, okay, this is your chance. Just relax, you know you can climb. Don't climb shakily. Just take it move by move and just fully relax into it. And this is probably the proudest of any bit of climbing I've ever been. The second I pulled onto the wall, I just enjoyed every single move of the route. I went through it, taking it move by move, slowly finding myself reach higher scoring zones. And by the time I hit the 60-point zone and the pump was really starting to burn, I just really was able to go into fight mode and give it everything I'd got. After foiling off the penultimate move, just getting out to a crimp and just pinging off, I knew that I'd extracted the maximum amount of myself. Coming down, I look at my coach, I look at the coach's pit, I see Liam holding up the one finger, and I knew I was in first position, so I had won a silver medal at least. And that rush of emotion was just incredible. And then walking down, pretty much celebrating like I'd already won gold because I was just so happy to have a silver. I sit there and then just take in the moment. I go over, I see the other competitors, and I just sit in my seat and enjoy the moment. I was now getting ready to watch Serato, one of the best climbers in the world, on a route which I know every single move of. And I was sat there in one of the best seats in the whole stadium getting to watch. Like, it was just such a surreal moment. I couldn't have felt better in that moment. Watching Serato climb, I was just really enjoying watching it. And when Serato came off, I didn't necessarily know that I'd just won gold. So I was sort of looking around, I didn't really know what was happening. I was still so psyched with my silver medal. And then I look over to Liam and he's again holding up that one single finger. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I've just won gold. That flood of emotions there, I can't describe it. I can't describe that feeling of putting all of those years of work into that one moment and then having my dream come true on that stage. standing up in complete disbelief. I don't really know what's going on. I run over to my parents, my family, everyone watching, and I just enjoy the moment. I celebrate. I just can't explain what that moment was like, and definitely the proudest I've ever been in my entire life. We'd done it. I'd not just won gold, but on that day, I felt like I was the best possible climber I could have been. At the beginning of my plan, me and my team committed to the combined format. That meant practicing everything: technique, power, resilience, everything in the climbing dictionary we tried to practice, and that I think is what got me my gold. For 3 moments I got to stand on the podium, and watching the flag slowly being raised to the national anthem is probably the proudest and happiest I've ever been in my entire life. That right there was a dream come true. It is already an amazing memory, and I only hope that climbing being on the biggest stage in the world only leads to more people climbing. I didn't start climbing to win medals. I started climbing because I just absolutely love it. Being on that stage with those other competitors, I just couldn't be in a more happy place. All of us put so much work into those moments, and it's everyone in the competition who makes it just such a nice environment. So to all of my friends, my family, the competitors who I compete against, all the friends I've made along the way, it's all due to climbing, and I just couldn't be more thankful for that. So everyone, if you're watching this and you've not climbed before and you're thinking of giving it a go, please go out and give climbing a go. It's so incredible. I'm sure you'll absolutely love it. The amount of friends you'll make along the way, it's a great exercise. It's just all round such a great sport. So yeah, keep climbing. And this right here is the probably one of the best little gifts I've been given. This is the last hold I touched before winning gold. This is the crimp which I go out for that my hand pings off. So this is the last touch of my competitions. All of those years of training, this was the last moment. This was the last milestone. This was the last thing which I touched, which achieved my dream. As you can see, it's not much. Now that I see it now, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I actually hold on to these things. That's got to be like 8 mil. No, it's hard because it's slopey as well, so. Yeah, probably around 8 mil. Don't throw that. This is by far now the best thing that I own. This is the best thing I have, I think. I'm never gonna let go of this. I've probably had this for like 3 weeks, a month now, and I don't think it's really left my sight yet. It's been so nice to have this, and I'm not sure I'm ever gonna get bored of looking at it. It's also really cool that it's got a bit of the Eiffel Tower in. I think that makes it really sort of unique to Paris and helps you sort of remember. So that's quite a nice little token of the medal. We just came back from holiday, and yeah, I did take this on holiday. It's a bit I didn't want to leave it home. I don't want it to get stolen, so I thought I'd take it with me. This is probably the best thing that I own now, and I'm definitely never going to get bored of looking at it. But yeah, nice to have this. But on to LA.